Oh, so each Sunday we've been talking about stewardship with different themes. On April 11th, we talked about the theme love of children and the important role the church plays in this. We heard from Amy Kilburn, who was leading with others in the way for a positive change for Clovis Unified in becoming unionized. How this will help the teachers in having a voice in providing the best education for their students and for the students being the recipients of that education. Last Sunday was Love of Neighbor. We saw a video with Elizabeth Davis Russell as she explained what it means to understand mental illness and what it means for our church as we learn more about mental illness and the stigmas that are associated with it. And we were gifted by Julia's sermon on creating a toolbox that will help us move through our days. She also talked about loving our neighbor and becoming advocates with an emphasis on our journey towards becoming a wise church. This past Thursday was Earth Day, and today our theme is love of creation. Our scripture this morning from 1 John talks about love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. If we think of love as a verb, then how do we love creation? What does it mean to be a steward, a caretaker of creation? For the past few months, I've been participating as a leader in a pilot program called Growing Together. The Growing Together theme is restoring faith, justice, and creation. It's made up of over 50 churches and 10 denominations all over the United States. Growing Together offers ways to create a toolkit and community building resources designed for the church and individuals, allowing congregations in faith-based conversations for practical applications of environmental healing and justice in church and home contexts. It was developed alongside advisors at Yale's Forum on Religion and Ecology and Oxford University's Laudato Si Institute. The Growing Together program connects the dots between faith, science, and creation care and welcomes people from all parts of our families of faith. We've had wonderful speakers talking about creation care and faith. One of the topics was about food justice as a part of environmental justice. As a church, what would we be feeding Jesus? Prepackaged food on a paper plate, or the fruits and vegetables of our neighboring farms on our dishes? Another topic was on environmental impact on consumerism. We've also discussed justice creation, and from our own San Joaquin Valley, which is often referred to as the food basket of the nation because of its concentration of farming and its massive output of food, such as milk, almonds, walnuts, grapes, and strawberries. But surprisingly, most of the people living in these rural communities, mainly low-income communities of color, lack access to fresh produce, while also suffering from negative health effects of intensive agricultural production, including cancer, asthma, and developmental issues. Rural communities across the country are founded on inequitable policies, economics, and cultures that are racially motivated and have been greatly influential in the foundations of our country. Environmentally speaking, large-scale industrial agricultural production has contributed to the Central Valley having the worst air quality in the country, as well as major water safety issues. Sadly, for me, there's only one more session left with this group, but the sessions have been so rich, so filled with information that they've caused me to reflect a lot about my own misuse of the environment, of the way way I eat and do things, as well as ways we as a church can begin to talk about and possibly do more as stewards, caretakers of creation within our own property, as well as things that we can do within our community. We gather today as creatures of the soil, of the water, and of the air that has been gifted to us. Earth, our home, cares for us and witnesses our actions, as does God. We pray to be grounded and guided as people who are earthly and joyful, practicing our oneness with the earth. May we live in the truth of our participation in the brokenness of our earth and take action where we can as we are able. And in light of Earth Day, may we lift our voice with the voice of the planet, seeking from God what makes for life, crying out for the violence that has been done, longing and working for creation's recovery. May we put our hands in the soil of the earth and bring our ears close to the ground, listening to our planet, for God is and always will be in this place. May we live as though love is a verb, and love and care for this place we call home, as God loves and cares for us all. Hear these words from Psalm 65. God, you are the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas. By your strength you established the mountains. You are girded with might. You silence the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves, the tumult of the people. Those who live at earth's farthest bounds are awed by your signs. You make the gateways of the morning and the evening shout for joy. You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grain, for so you have prepared it. You water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening it with showers, and blessing its crop. You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with richness. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. This is what the earth is supposed to look and feel like. These gifts of creation are what our ancestors enjoyed and are what our future generations are supposed to enjoy. Preaching on a Sunday so close to Earth Day and to care for this earth is a cause and concern that is close to my heart. As many of you know, I love to fish with my boys. I guess I should call them men these days. We're always disturbed by what we find by other fisher folks. Water bottles, beer and soda cans, fishing line, and packaging from fishing items, empty bait containers, food wrappers, and we even find disposable diapers. We pick up what we find and always try to leave it cleaner than the way we found it. But it seems as though it's a never-ending problem. It's just hard to find words that inspire reflection and action without inducing guilt. But we need to look at our history and what we're doing today that may not offer these gifts of our planet to the next generation. I want to talk about an important aspect of what we are doing to our planet that actually has an effect on our water, our air, and our soil, all of which we need to survive. I'm talking this morning about waste. The waste we create, from the overflowing landfills to the plastic islands in our oceans and so much more. In the United States alone, which is only 5% of the world's population, we produce 1/2, yes, 50% of the world's waste. It's amazing, isn't it? So as we continue to think about Earth Day and creation and keeping the idea of love as a verb, let's start some truths about waste. In America alone, each of us throws approximately 5.6 pounds of trash away every day. Well, maybe that doesn't sound too bad. But with around 333 million people living in the United States, that adds up to roughly 932,400 tons of daily garbage, which is enough to fill over 75,000 garbage trucks a day. Whew. To visualize this, that is 22 billion plastic bottles every year and enough office paper to construct a 12-foot high wall from Los Angeles to Manhattan. It is 300 laps around the equator in paper and plastic cups, forks, and spoons. It is 500 disposable cups per average worker, cups that will still be sitting in landfills 5 centuries from now. Not to mention disposable diapers, which take 500 plus years to decompose. Batteries, 100 years, and aluminum and or steel cans that take 200 plus years also to decompose. As we start to understand how we as Americans have been filling up landfills, we also need to understand single-use items and planned obsolescence. This is where companies have made items to fail, to stop working, like cell phones, so that we'll throw them away and purchase new ones. Society wants us to live in a certain way. Society wants us to think of money as God. Having things are God. And the God of advertising tells us what we should buy. But this is not God. This is not a way to live that respects this planet and the people, animals, and plants that inhabit it. This is not what it means to be the caretakers of creation. To relate this to our reality of money and what we purchase, as our purchasing increases, of course, so does our waste. And a half of the millions of tons from yearly waste will end up in one of over 3,000 active landfills across this country. And then we must also add the trash in over 10,000 old municipal landfills, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. Let's put this into perspective when we think about church and the waste that comes from our own facility. Now, we could say we did a really good job last year, but then again, we were not in church last year. But if we were to look at some statistics on church waste, a church with approximately 100 members creates 186,000 pounds of trash per year. Most of it coming from things like water bottles, plastic and paper cups, plates, utensils, napkins, paper towels, individually wrapped foods, bulletins, and other office supplies, education materials, mailings, etc. Now, let's multiply that by the number of churches, synagogues, and mosques here in Fresno. Wow. Then let's multiply it by all those in the Central Valley and all the churches in the state of California. The numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. We as people of faith, as stewards of this planet, are contributing to the waste problem. You know, here at Community, we're pretty good about using our own dishes and utensils, using water-efficient dishwasher. And before the pandemic, we cut down on the amount of paper we used for bulletins. But for the last year, you know, we haven't used any bulletins. So when we come back to in-person, could it be this is something we don't use anymore? Are there other things we could do to reduce the impact on waste? There's a little information on landfills. Before there were municipal dumps, which began to appear on the map in the 20th century, humans burned their garbage. As many of you might remember, I don't know if you remember, but we had one of those big old rusty garbage cans in the backyard, and the ashes would fall out of the little holes on the sides after my dad would burn. Some of you might remember that. Or it was buried on the outskirts of town to avoid disease. Did you know the circa 1937 Fresno Municipal Sanitary Landfill was considered the first modern sanitary landfill of its kind? And future landfills followed suit. It was just located 3 miles southwest of Fresno. That landfill was closed in 1987 because of higher environmental standards. Landfills really weren't much more than man-made craters in the earth, and they were pretty crude. Actually, they were environmental disasters, leaching contaminated liquid into the soil and groundwater, as well as releasing large amounts of methane into the air. In 1976, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act changed all of that. The law required landfills to be lined with plastic, clay, or both. But we're learning now that the plastic and or clay, which in some cases only have a 20-year manufacturer life, can and will leak into the groundwater, creating leachate. Leachate, in the narrow environmental context, is any liquid material that drains from land or stockpiled material and contains significantly elevated concentrations of undesirable material derived from the material that it passes through. In environmental sciences, it has the specific meaning of a liquid that has dissolved or entrained environmentally harmful substances that may enter the environment. Landfill gas is one of the harmful substances that may enter our environment. It is a dangerous, virtually invisible concoction generated in the most natural way possible. The bacterial decomposition of organic material. The result is half methane and half carbon dioxide and water vapor, with trace amounts of oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and non-methane organic compounds, or NMOC, which can cause smog if uncontrolled. Environmentalists are worried about methane. Though methane doesn't linger as long as carbon dioxide, it is far more effective at absorbing the sun's heat and contributing to global warming. For the first 20 years after it meets the atmosphere, the methane is 84 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So what do we do with all this information? Well, now's the other part of our thinking of love as a verb, the action part, the steward, the caretaker part. We have all been participants in the brokenness of our world. So how do we begin to restore that relationship? Dr. Ruth Valerio reminds us that Jesus came to restore relationships. We hear this in the scriptures of Galatians 3, Ephesians 2, and Colossians 20. But we need to remember that it's about the restorations of all relationships, including our relationship with creation. One way we can restore that relationship is through recycling and composting. We're all pretty familiar with recycling, but unfortunately, only 9% of plastics were recycled in 2020. We also know about composting, and I want to emphasize the importance of composting and why we should find ways to do it at home and maybe at church. Currently in the United States, over 60 billion pounds of mineral-rich food material go into the landfills each year. According to the compost story by Kiss the Ground, they ask us to imagine what it would be like if we diverted just a part of those billions of pounds from the landfill and turned them into compost. To imagine our our city's vacant lots converted to food forests, to imagine abundance everywhere. And best of all, composting can help reverse climate change. A win-win. Waste is defined as anything unused, unproductive, or not properly utilized. Did you know that waste is a human invention? We, humans, are the only creatures on Earth who do not live a zero waste existence. That's something to think about. Trillions of microbes that are in and around everything, including us. Anything that lives gets repurposed and contributes to the growth of new life. Some 500 billion years ago, these microbes brought plants onto the land. The microbes provided minerals and water in exchange for carbon sugars produced by the plants through photosynthesis. They resulted in a terrestrial explosion of life. More life meant more excretions and death, which meant more food and nutrients for decomposers and all soil life known as the soil food web. This increased the abundance and biodiversity of ecosystems and turned barren land into fertile soil. Today, we have learned that composting mimics this natural upcycling process as it transforms combinations of organic material into life-filled, nutrient-available organic matter. Compost isn't just mulch, manure, or food waste on its own, nor does it stink. Imagine the smell of the forest floor after rain. That's what compost smells like. Compost has superpowers. It can enhance food nutrition, increase crop yield, and strengthen plants and immune systems, all while increasing the soil's water holding capacity. And compost stimulates plant growth by bringing in microbial life, nutrients, and water retaining humus to depleted soils. More plant growth takes even more carbon out of the atmosphere. Microbes feed plants, plants feed microbes, and the self-regenerating soil carbon pump cycles on and on, building soil. Compost is a regenerative substance. It is an essential microbial source, a probiotic for the land beneath our feet. To me, along with other things that are being done to reverse the damage we've done to our earth, composting as much of our living waste, food and yard waste, seems like a pretty great plan. It also offers many ways of helping to clean up our air, our soil, and our water, and it can help reverse climate change. So there's work to be done, and we can make a difference. Our church already makes a difference. We've committed ourselves to work towards becoming a green church, and we have made great strides in that direction. We have solar panels, we have xeriscape, we try not to use plastic or paper goods, and we recycle. But if we love as a verb, then there's still action to be taken. We know the truth about our planet, our waste, and what will become of our future if we don't participate in changing the way we've been living over the years. Individually or as a church, we could do simple things like using reusable bags. And by the way, we have plenty of those at the church, and they have our names on them, which is great for advertising, by the way. We can use those for when we go shopping. We can even use them to give gifts in. What an awesome idea that is, instead of using more paper. Let's see, we can choose to use reusable containers for packing meals. We can stop buying and using water bottles and use reusable water bottles instead. We can buy in bulk whenever possible, but we have to be careful that things are not double packed or individually wrapped and then repackaged and sold as bulk. If possible, we could discuss within our church about composting for food scraps and yard waste, or find a place that will take them. We can cut back on our junk mail. Most of us receive more than 30 pounds of it a year. Who knows how much space is still available for landfills, but that doesn't mean we should continue to produce garbage like we have been. Let's be conscious of what we use, how we use it, and how we discard it. From Revelation 22, the river of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life, with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nation. We need to remember that we are a sacred part of God's creation, that God cares for each of us and is with us in times of abundance and scarcity. Just as water flows endlessly from the river of life, may we continue to go out and spread God's love and care to all of creation. James Baldwin states, "For nothing is fixed, forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born. And we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have." Now let's pray. God, we know you are our source of renewal and strength. We witness your interactions with creation through our life-sustaining water, soil, and air. We are invited to recognize the importance of water, soil, and air, and to seek ways to protect it as a means of honoring you. Help us to become the vessels carrying your life-giving offer, to be caretakers, to be stewards of this planet, to restore all of creation. May we use courage to challenge forces that harm and joyfully spread your message of new life through the many ways of promoting sustainable living for all of creation. And may we practice love as a verb.